It's Friday, June 12th, 2015, and you're listening to SYN Boldly, the podcast, the Sign Your Name Project. I'm your host, Trey Comstock, and with me this week, as ever, is Stephen Doss.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, indeed. On this week's show, it is another edition of What Happens When Heroes Fall in a mostly discussion show. Of course, before we delve into the meaningfully serious topic that we have at hand, Stephen, I believe you have a special dedication that you wanted to make for tonight's episode.
I did. I thought we were just joking about that, but okay.
Sometimes
yeah.
I carry jokes to fruition.
I know, you did it. It was kind of impressive. So the American dream, Dusty Rhodes, passed away. He was 69 years old.
Too young.
But I mean, kind of nice to see someone who passes away for medical reasons, like old age, instead of horrible concussions, doing something that, they love to do. So, go watch the Dusty Rhodes Hard Times promo.
Yep.
And you'll see why he was super loved in the 80s, because he called out automation, because the 80s were the big time when automation was coming to fruition,
and especially in the auto industry.
Industry, and he was like calling this stuff out. It was kind of awesome. Back in the 80s, you don't see that anymore with people calling out social issues in such a passionate way.
Well, so professional wrestling, this is not germane to anything, of course, but professional wrestling has this kind of weird tension with real life events. So I don't know how close you follow wrestling, because I don't that much. But
it's just the only reason these come up is because these are I remember watching these with my dad. Was it. I haven't watched in a very long time, so I don't know who the champion is.
There's been this character Rusev, who is a large Russian who vaguely worships the image of Vladimir Putin. And at one point, he held the U.S. title belt, which then had to be reclaimed by John Cena. So,
who I guess is John. I assume John Cena is American made or whatever.
Right. Well, John Cena's always been kind of like the American. He was in the Marine. So. Anyways,
nice.
The political commentary continues. It's just maybe not so much like blue-collar liberalism so much as American
sensationalism. Exceptionalism.
I didn't watch this, but at some point there involved a tank at WrestleMania. This is all I know. From secondhand reports, there was a tank used either, I can't remember if it was driven by Rusev or driven by Cena, or who cares.
Oh my God, he's using a tank!
Right. My point, this was
How
all
do
of
you do
this
a
is to
wrestling
say,
about a tank?
hey, I know slightly more about professional wrestling at this point than I have at any other point in my life. Two, thanks to this wonderful podcast called the Power Bombcast. Listen to it. I don't understand half of what's said on it. I just like listening to it. And two, the social commentary continues. We do social commentary as well, though hopefully it involves less, long flowing locks and.
It involves hard times.
It definitely.
Trey Comstock. You know what hard times is, Trey Comstock?
I do. And one of my favorite television families is experiencing.
Do you really want to admit that now?
Look, man, I've been watching that show since 2010. If I stay up late enough, I could probably sit here and name all 19 of those children plus the grandchildren in birth order. I'm a little afraid to try it now that I've said that. But yes, we're talking about 19 kids and counting in the Duggars. For those of you who've remained blissfully ignorant of this entire thing, you are blessed among us. Mm-hmm. But so it came out a couple weeks ago, not that long ago, that Josh Duggar admitted to molesting 5 people, or it's 4 or 5 people, and at least three of them are his own sisters. The molestation didn't happen recently. It happened. It happened 12 years ago. He confessed to it in 2006, or confessed to it in like 2004. It went to the cops in 2006. There was a police report that was filed that was obtained by In Touch magazine. That police report has subsequently been expunged from the record because Jim Bob Duggar is really good friends with the court in wherever they live in Arkansas. Tawny Town, something. It's in the establishment shots for the show. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was Josh Duggar would feel the intimate parts of his sisters and a babysitter mostly while they were sleeping, and they didn't notice it, and mostly above the clothes, but sometimes not above the clothes, and sometimes not while they were sleeping. In short, this happened multiple times. Like a fair amount of times. And apparently, according to the testimony to the police in 2006 and reiterated today, it only happened for a brief period of time. It has not happened subsequently. Josh apologized, which is really important, and they forgave him, and this is all tragic, but that was a long time ago, and he's learned his lesson. And he went to some non-accredited treatment facility where he apparently mostly just remodeled houses as punishment. Punishment. And that was it, and everyone agreed not to press charges because most of the people who could have pressed charges were Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, and of course they're not going to press charges, and so they covered up this whole thing. So Josh has quit his job from the Family Research Council, where he was kind of one of their lead lobbyists, and his sisters have gone on CNN, I believe, or Fox News or wherever, some or more than one national news program to talk about it. Now we know it was Jill. Let me think about this. I can do this. I think it was Jill, Ginger, Jessa, and Joanna, something like that. Or Jill, Ginger, and Jessa. Jays. So they're all Jays. This is, not Jana. She's the oldest daughter. And then a babysitter. And yeah, it's real tragic in a lot of ways. So, Steven, I have some thoughts, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, there's a lot of different things happening in this. First, you have the act itself. You have the act that, of what happened. And it was a horrible, horrible thing that happened. And no family, no person should have to go through that.
Sure.
And then you have that. You also have the cover-up. So you have these people who are basically using their family, their quiverful family, to pay the bills. You got 19 kids.
I mean, and literally how they... And so this happened just as they were starting to get prominent. If you trace the dates back, this was happening in like 02, 03, 04. Their first like big TV special with their current production company was like 2005. It was 14 kids and another on the way or something. Not that I know that from the clip shows that I've been watching recently or anything. And so this is all, and so they go to the police right before they're about to do an interview because, this came to light and came to the cops because they were doing a special with Oprah.
Mm-hmm.
So it somehow got out through like a mysterious letter that was written by a family friend or written by someone and then put in a book that someone else ended up with. And anyways, an email was sent to the Oprah show about the accusations. The Oprah show kind of did their due diligence and reported it to, I believe, federal authorities who then talked to local authorities in Arkansas. And so this had to go to the police. Apparently 2 years prior to this, right when Josh confessed, they talked to the elders of their church, but they didn't then make the step of talking to the cops. And the police report ends with this kind of sad, Well, the statute of limitations on this is 2.5 years. I
Yeah.
can find no evidence of a crime having been committed in the last 2.5 years. There's nothing else I can do. And that's
Yep.
how the police report ends. With this is actually a crime, but I can't do anything about it because
Yeah.
they have very cleverly or very luckily or very cleverly turned this in outside the statute of limitations.
Definitely.
Because again, the main person who could press charges are the parents of the victims, who are also the parents of the perp.
Yeah. And it's one of those, it's like, we're not going to, press charges because how do you handle that as a parent? Let's just, there is the whole, they pulled strings, blah, 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 whatever. For this one, let's just think about what that does to a family and they don't have to have, 19 kids, but you have this happen and, what do you do? You have one, and I want to ask you, do you think that, when the young women told their mom and dad, hey, Josh is doing this
But
or whatever.
that's not how it happened.
Yeah.
So theoretically, that happened in only one of the cases. In most of them, they didn't even find, the girls themselves didn't even find out it had happened until after Josh confessed. Because most of this happened while they were asleep. Only one incident after Josh had already confessed, I believe, did it happen like in a much more like public way, when not public like outside the house, but like not while they're all asleep, right? And then they ran and reported, and this all sort of spun up again. But for the most part, it happened because Josh confessed in like 2004 for whatever reason.
Right.
But anyways, you're making a larger point.
Yeah, and the larger point is, because these are some very intense accusations if they were, brought up to the parents. And what do? Do you say, like, I mean, I honestly don't know what I would do in that situation.
Well,
just
step
because,
one, I would make sure that my child is at an accredited treatment facility.
Yeah, I wouldn't
which
send them
didn't
to.
happen.
Yeah, I would not send them to where they send them, where it's like, number one, look at what the girl did to make you think this way. Was she wearing inappropriate clothes? Was she being immodest? Was she leading you on, basically? Were you in a situation where you found yourself aroused? That's just some of the many different things. And then it's like, what would you do instead? Oh, I should read my Bible more, or I should, do this stuff that has nothing to do with anything.
Well, and you have to wonder, this is a family with a very strict code of conduct that has often, from the outside looking in, appeared rather unrealistic. And it turned, to me, what I see in this somewhat is a consequence of this unrealistic regime. He has no, what Josh did is terrible, but I think Josh is put in a scenario that's less than ideal as well. I mean, I have some sympathy for him growing up in the Duggar household as he did. Everyone has sexual curiosities. Unfortunately, he found a really inappropriate way, a truly damaging way, in which to handle that. And so I think some of this falls on, Michelle and Jibob in a couple different ways. One, they've built this house of unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
That doesn't provide really healthy outlets for adolescent sexuality. Yeah, not even like the norms of dating or, boy-girl friends you can hang out with on your own. Even if I'm not talking about like, my body teenage years, but just like, normal, co-ed socializing.
Yeah.
Not a part, unless it's only at the homeschool conference. And that's why Josh got married to his girl from the homeschool conference, but that's only like once a year. So I'm not even talking about like porn or masturbation or any of those kind of things. I'm simply talking about, Good old
human
fashioned
social interaction.
social interaction, hanging out with your friends who are girls at the high school lunchroom, right? That's a social release. So Josh has no outlet, has a clearly unhealthy relationship with his own sexuality, partly from not having an outlet and partly for whatever reason. And so then he reacts inappropriately, and then Jim Bob and Michelle compound that issue by not properly dealing with it and making it potentially even more damaging for the victims who are also their daughters.
Yeah.
And then the babysitter. Again, it's all a little weird.
Yeah.
So some of the, this is a religious show, and so far we haven't actually touched on the religious angle of this.
Mm-hmm.
But some of this is one of those instances of, here are these Christian heroes, see how they fall. And that's the narrative, right? If you read the mainstream press, or in the Bill O'Reilly's words, the lamestream press, if you read the mainstream press take on this, it's, oh, those Duggars and their stupid religious beliefs, look how ridiculous they are. And now look, that didn't work out.
This is what happens to them.
This is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the problem with that is their image did not leave a whole lot of room for sin. Sin to them, sin in their public image was occasionally the kids talk back to their parents. Right? It was this unrealistic image of perfection that they worked so hard to maintain. And maybe to a certain extent, I mean, that I just was watching interviews with their film crew before the scandal happened. Like, oh, they're just really like this. Sure, but clearly not, because now we have one of them's a confessed child molester, and two of them, the adults in the scenario, covered this up with the cops.
Yeah.
So where does that leave you in terms of the people who kind of looked up to them in faith? Looked up to this image of them that had been in faith, that had been portrayed.
Yeah, I think, it shows us that even the most, quote, Christian of us are still humans. Nobody is perfect.
We all sin and fall short of the glory of God.
Yeah, yeah. And what you need to worry about is when you're denying your own humanity, like it sounds like they were. They weren't, learning about these average human desires at the age when they needed to, so that something like this wouldn't have, or discussing like, hey, this is why this is not appropriate.
Or admitting publicly, or just casually, that like all of these things exist within this world of courtship rather than dating, and side hugs, and that it doesn't always work out in this sort of TLC fairy tale world that was portrayed. That's not the reality. The reality is these are flawed people, no more or less flawed than any of the rest of us. But they weren't. That's not the image that was related.
Right.
Which brings kind of an interesting point of comparison to the other major, not maybe the other, but one other major kind of Christian reality show family, and that's the Robertsons of Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
Point of reference. You've been out of the Deep South for a while. I got to make sure you still understand these references.
I
the
do
Robertsons of Duck Dynasty fame. See, they all confess to have been kind of awful people for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Drunks and addicts, and just kind of mean people. And then they talk about the transforming power of Christ, that they are now better than they were. Right?
Yeah.
They make no claim at perfection. Phil goes out of his way to not be perfect very publicly. Right?
Yeah.
And I have a lot of problems with what Phil has to say. But one thing I don't have a problem with is the way they portray themselves as Christians. Right? I don't like their Christian theology, but their theology leaves room for sin. And that the sin is still present in their lives and has been present in their lives. They talk very openly, somewhat on the show, but in their speeches and their books, which none of which have I read, I've heard of them. Mm-hmm. Let's be clear here. I've heard of them. that, they're a little more open with, no, these have been my struggles. One of the reasons why they don't drink now is because they used to drink way too much and these kinds of things. And so if you're going to do a Christian reality show, or if you're going to end up on a pedestal because of your faith, you either go the Pope route and just, have lived this weirdly celibate life, or maybe you talk very openly about how the reality of the Christian life. Because what the Duggars did, in my view, is they created an unrealistic expectation of what real Christians look like. That they are these oddly sanitized, sinless people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't fit my life or, the Christians that I know and that I work with and that I, care for as a pastor. Right? I have a beautiful congregation, but they're beautifully flawed people like every other congregation in Christendom.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's exactly right.
Then it turns out that's untrue, and I think a lot of people are shaken by that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is sadly in some aspects of Christianity this idea that if you get it right, everything is going to be hunky-dory.
Yeah.
You'll never have any problems, and you'll get your TLC show, and everything will be wonderful. And that's just not the truth.
I'm a whole lot of kids short of a TLC show.
Yeah.
Sydney and I are even behind Josh and Anna Duggar. And they got married around the same time Sydney and I did. So both Josh and Anna Duggar and Sydney and I got married in 2009. Mm-hmm. And so they have 4 kids or 3 kids and 1 on the way. And we just had our first. So we are way behind.
Yeah. I think I'm going to get a TL show when me and Kathleen, if we ever have children, that's going to be called, instead of 19 kids and counting, it's going to be called 1 Kid and That's Enough.
You may not. Now they have a family of 12 kids, all who sing in a band. This is,
That's called the Partridge Family, and that was
family,
not.
But it is the Partridge, or it's the Von Trapps, or whatever. It's in that stupid Sound of Music. I don't.
Yeah, when you go from Nazi-held Austria to Nazi-held Germany. Ah, crap.
Yeah. Anyways, it is this. You're right. There is this kind of, if we can make us seem perfect enough, and that show prints money for them, and it sustains this. Fascinating lifestyle of theirs, of being able to have an unrealistic number of children.
Yeah.
Many of whom I'm sure, seem to be really cool people.
Yeah, and I mean,
go ahead.
It's the one that, they can say, you thought this family was perfect. Well, look at what happened here. And not to belittle what happened or to say everyone's making a big deal out of this. No, this is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It sucks that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish, people are willing to, if something like this is happening to you or it's happening to someone, tell somebody so that this thing that doesn't happen where it's it was 2.5 years ago, so the statute of limitations is up. No, it needs to be out there so that you can say, this is something that's happening and there needs to be consequences. That being said, a lot of times people are looking for ways to get you. And it's not because they are empathetic towards the victims, and there are victims. Yeah, it's not because they want to see justice, served. It's not because, they want to make sure that someone who needs help at the time gets the help they need. It's because they just want to say, you thought they were perfect, but look at this. They're still human and flawed.
Right. And that creates kind of another one of those kind of points where people go, oh, this Christianity thing's totally nuts because these people claim to be so Christian and did these terrible things. And and you go, yeah, this is the problem with a theology of entire sanctification, right?
Yeah.
So this is getting a little in the theological weeds, but I actually think it's worth explicating this point. So there's this, in some and I get the sense in the Duggars theology, this is what's going on, but I don't know this for sure, that for some, the moment you're saved, the moment you're justified, whatever language you want to use, you're then also entirely sanctified, which means you're also then entirely without sin. Or you need to do the best you can to appear that way. For Methodists, or for me, there's this idea of ongoing sanctification. That's like, okay, so you're saved, you're justified, whatever, great. This doesn't mean you're actually any better off than you were 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
What you've started is a process.
Yep.
Methodism is a process that eventually forms you into a better Christian over a lifetime. And some people make it further down this road than others.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea of justification kicking off a process of ongoing sanctification.
Right.
What the Duggars made a claim at is entire sanctification. Look how entirely sanctified our family is. We're just so holy, it's gushing out of our pores. And maybe to a certain extent that's absolutely true. But what they left out is that visible process of ongoing sanctification, which lets you say, Christ is real in my life. I need Christ to be realer in my life as I continue to grow.
Right.
Does that distinction make sense? I know you have a degree in this too, so why am I asking you? But
yeah, it does. I mean, the fact that you are, quote, sanctified, does that mean you are 100% sanctified? It means you're on your way to sanctification.
Right. On my way to entire sanctification, but it's not immediate. It's not.
You're not there yet.
I'm just not there yet. Right. And so that's what the Robertsons are saying, right? It's like, we look, we used to be a lot less sanctified than we are now. Trust me, brother.
Yeah.
And here we are now, and we still, Phil especially, has some distance to go.
Yes.
The Duggars portrayed this entirely sanctified image, which is a dangerous claim to make. And how much of it is them, and how much of it is their marketing people, and how much of it is TLC, and how much of it is just their entire brand that they got stuck into like a vortex.
Yeah.
Because 19 Kids and Counting prints money, and it's a schadenfreude for an entire nation. Like, they are not, none of them, Josh included, are in an ideal situation, but occasionally they don't help themselves.
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
We just need to have less reality TV.
I certainly need less reality TV in my life.
Yeah.
But I also think we need to resist the urge to turn people into heroic objects.
Definitely.
Which is some of what happened to the Duggars, right? They're people. Like, this image couldn't be real, not because I don't think they're godly people. Clearly they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everyone has a chink in their armor. It's the nature of sin. It's the nature of life. It's the nature of humanity. But some of what's at flaw here is our desire for heroes, right? We want heroes like Superman who have no flaws. But when the reality is most heroes are more like Batman, deeply flawed, but doing what they can. Really just saying the Duggars are Batman. That's all I'm saying, is the Duggars are Batman. That was a profound point to make.
That was very profound.
That's the show title. The Duggars are Batman. That's probably copyright somewhere.
Just put a circle TM or a TM or an R or whatever it is.
On that note, we should probably get out of here. Next month, we're going to talk more about gay marriage. Most likely.
Because we'll probably have a decision by then.
Yeah, oh God, I hope so. The suspense is killing me. If you have any feedback, if you want to talk about, issues with hero worship or how I'm totally wrong about the Duggars or the Robertsons, I'm probably wrong. What is it? It's SYN Boldly at endfear.org, facebook.com/signyournameproject, or at SYN Boldly on Twitter. And we have a new URL for the site too. We got a hold of signyourname.org.
Yay!
Through the joys of waiting just long enough, we got signyourname.org for no money. They used to try to be charging us $1,300, and then they let the domain lapse, and I leapt like a tiger. So we have signyourname.org. With that, go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and end fear by signing your name. Good night. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Show title is the Doug. What I'm saying is the Duggars are bad.
Yeah.
It is. You had this analogy isn't totally Crazy Town. I mean, okay, it's Crazy Town, but it's not,
It
not
makes
wrong.
sense. You're not wrong.
Not wrong. But we want them to be Superman, that unrealistic hero with the perfect hair, the little curl, never gets messed up. Actually, really fitting for Duggars. Their hair never gets messed up.
No, it doesn't, because they're
Oddly-
Stepford wives.
Oddly perfect.